Hello guys, welcome back to another video. You have joined me with my BMW 520D, and today we're going to be talking about all of the parts that you should replace if you want your N47 engine to be reliable. Now before we get into the video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you have not already done so. Now let's get into it. Okay then, so here we have the N47 engine, which is the 2-litre 4-cylinder diesel engine, but it's pretty much the exact same as the N57 engine, which is the 6-cylinder 3-litre diesel engine. It shares many of the same components and parts and common problems. Now then, we'll start with the big one. So if you've been following me for a while, you'll know that I have replaced the timing chain kit on this engine. Now, do you absolutely have to replace the timing chain kit on these engines? Is it almost certainly going to snap? No. Is it a good idea to replace the timing chain kit on these engines? Yes. If your car has covered 100,000 miles and you want your car and your engine running sweet for a very long time, then I would recommend replacing the timing chain kit. Now, if you have a manual, I would recommend replacing the clutch kit and the flywheel at the same time as replacing the timing chain kit, because at some point in the future you're more than likely going to need to replace those anyway, so you may as well do it at the same time, because the clutch and the flywheel have to be removed to access the timing chain kit, so you're not going to be paying any more in labour. It's not going to take any extra time to stick a new clutch kit and flywheel on. You're basically only paying for the parts. But of course, if you want it done at a later date, you've then got to pay for all that labour again. So it kind of makes sense to do it all at the same time. Now, like I've mentioned many times before, when you get the timing chain kit replaced, you're not just getting the timing chain kit replaced. You are getting various different gaskets. You're getting the rocker cover gasket, you're getting the sump gasket, you're getting the timing cover resealed, you're getting the injectors reseated and new seals. Of course, you're going to be getting fresh oil and an oil filter. And while the engine is out, it's a good idea to, correct any other problems that the engine has as well. So that's why, regardless of the condition of your original timing chains, it really does make sense to do it anyway, because you are getting a lot of work done for the time and money. The next part that I would recommend replacing, if you have not already done so, do not let this fail, and it is the crankshaft pulley. So if you take a look down here, you can see it's actually starting to go rusty now. That's absolutely fine. You can see I have replaced the crankshaft pulley. Now, along with the crankshaft pulley, I also replaced the entire drive belt kit, which comprises of the automatic tensioner and the idler pulley, and of course the belt. Now, I'd recommend replacing all of these at the same time if your car has covered 120,000 miles or so, because if not, then you are going to be waiting until that crankshaft pulley fails. What can actually happen if that does fail, the belt can slip off and end up being sucked in to your crankshaft itself, and then you're just asking for a bunch of more trouble. So just replace the crankshaft pulley, the drive belt kit, which comprises, like I said, of the automatic tensioner and the idler pulley. Replace it all at one go, then you're good for another 100,000 miles or so. The next thing that you need to pay some attention to, and I'm going to remove the engine cover just so you can see it in better detail, and that is the intake manifold. So there is various different issues with the intake manifold. The first one is that the swirl flaps can fail. Now, it's not as common on the N47 and N57 for the swirl flaps to fail. It's not like the previous M series engine, so the M47 and M57, but the swirl flaps themselves can fail if the brass rod that runs the length of it does wear enough. Now, not only can the swirl flaps fail, but the seal at the front here can fail as well. And now you cannot just replace the seal, you actually have to buy a new intake manifold. Now, this intake manifold here, this is actually a reinforced intake manifold. So the swirl flaps are aluminium, I believe, and the rod, that is a strengthened rod, so it will not wear, and all the bushes and everything has been reinforced, so it means that I don't have to worry about any of the issues that that the standard intake manifold has. Now, you can alleviate the two issues at the same time, with the seal at the front here leaking and with the swirl flaps failing, by just doing a swirl flap delete kit. but by doing that you are going to compromise the drivability of the engine. You're going to be down on MPG, and you're also going to be down on low down torque. And I mean low down torque, I mean low in the rev range, so below 2000 RPM you're going to be losing torque. And for me, because I've tried it in the past, that just made the car horrible to drive, so I decided just to get a replacement intake manifold. The next thing then you need to pay some attention to, unless you want to have various issues later on down the line, is the EGR system. So if you're having a look in your engine bay and you're having a look in my engine bay, you'll notice that something is missing right here. As you can see, I have no EGR valve and no EGR cooler. That's because I've done a complete delete. So as you can see, it is blanked off on the intake port side, and it's also blanked off on the exhaust side as well. And then you have this blank down here, that is just to block off one of the coolant ports. Now there's various issues that can occur with the entire EGR system. So not only are you letting sooty exhaust gases go back through into your intake manifold, which is in turn going to clog that up, but the EGR valve itself, that can also clog up, which means periodic cleaning or even replacement. And not only that, the EGR cooler itself can end up leaking as well. So you're pretty much, you know, just going to be chasing your tail when it comes to keeping the EGR system as it is, you know, in place. So in my opinion, just get rid of it and be done, and you're not ever going to have any issues with it then. And that's the exact same for another emissions control device, which is the DPF, the diesel particulate filter, which on some models it is on the downpipe. On my particular 5 Series, it's actually in a separate box around the middle of the car. Now it really is up to you what you want to do with your DPF. Now I'm not going to recommend that you delete it, but if you do keep it in place, then you are always going to have issues with it not regenerating, or with it getting blocked up from just, you know, short trips where you're not even getting your engine up to temperature. You know, it's just going to cause you a lot of headaches and a lot of issues later on down the line. Now an issue that can occur if your DPF does get fully blocked is you can actually end up blowing your turbo, which of course is going to be an expensive repair. So I just decided to completely gut the DPF, leave the box still in place though, and you know, everything still looks factory, but it just means that I'm not going to have any of the headache of maintaining a DPF. The next thing then, and this is something that you need to replace before it fails ideally, and this is the glow plug system. So if you take a look down here between the rocker cover and the intake manifold, you can see the cable for the glow plugs. So it's fairly easy to access, to be honest. You just need to remove this cable branch over to one side, and you should be able to access the glow plugs themselves. And I'd recommend replacing glow plugs at around 80,000 miles or so. Don't wait for them to fail. When they have failed, it's more than likely going to be too late. They're going to end up being seized in the head, and then you're going to have a massive headache of trying to remove them. So, you know, don't wait for them to fail. Just you know, change them periodically, like I said, every few years or so, or every 80,000 miles, and then you shouldn't have an issue. Now it's well worth replacing the glow plug module at the same time, which sits down here on the side of the oil filter housing, because that can be a common problem on these engines. So replace that at the same time as replacing your glow plugs. Another thing that's well worth replacing then, if you have not already done so, because it will be on its way out soon, and that is this pipe just here. This is the crankcase ventilation hose, and essentially what it does, it takes the crankcase vapors away from the engine and puts it back through the air intake. Now if you have the earlier style hose, then, you know, with the rubber connectors, chances are it's probably going to be pretty melted, because, you know, oil does tend to get hot as you would imagine. But if you have this style hose, then there's a good chance that it'd be quite brittle, and when you go to remove it, it'll actually just break away in your hand. So if you haven't replaced this already, I would recommend doing so. It's not a very expensive part to replace. And along with that, you can also replace the crankcase ventilation diaphragm itself as well. Another couple of things that's well worth replacing, again, if your car's covered 100,000 miles or so, is both of the boost pipes. So the one that goes from the intercooler to the anti-shudder valve, and the one that goes from the turbo to the intercooler. Now I don't mean this plastic pipe here, I mean the rubber pipe just below it. What can actually happen is the seal can go on the pipe, and you'll know when it has because you'll have a little stream of oil leaking down there, and you'll know when this pipe has failed because it generally likes to fail where the intake air temperature sensor goes in. You'll notice you'll have a pretty big boost leak. I actually experienced this myself, and again if the seals go on either end, then you'll notice some oil dripping down. Don't worry about the oil, that is completely normal. That's just from the crankcase ventilation system. And I guess really the final point that I need to make, and I've said it a bunch of times but I have to keep saying it, is change your oil often. The biggest thing that causes these engines to fail prematurely is lack of oil changes. Do not listen to BMW's recommended 15 to 18,000 miles. Honestly, just change your oil for good quality oil and an oil filter every 5 to 6,000 miles. If you want this engine to last, if you want your car to last and, you know, keep running reliably, then change your oil and oil filter every 5 to 6,000 miles. Do not forget that. That is the #1 biggest thing that you can do to sustain the life of these engines. Okay then guys, that is pretty much it. Now if you are an N47 or N57 engine owner, then do consider subscribing because I've got a lot of videos on these engines on my channel if you haven't seen them already. I hope this video has been helpful. Please give it a like, leave a comment down below. Of course, subscribe if you have not already done so, and I'll see you all in that next one. Peace!